Good day, everybody. Welcome back to Divulgence. Today, I have Kurtis Warren joining me. He has a background in software. He's a technologist. He's also an entrepreneur who is the founder and owner of FUNK Coffee out in Vancouver. So please welcome Kurtis Warren. Kurtis, how are you, my friend? Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I'm super stoked to be here, and thank you so much for having me on, Jordan.
Well, it's a pleasure. We're gonna talk about crypto and Bitcoin today, which has been a hot topic for quite a few years now, and it's still something that I just haven't really gotten into. I don't know too much about it, so I'm really happy to get a chance to learn about it from yourself. Before we get into any of that, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you into and interested in money and finance and crypto and all that stuff.
Yeah, happy to. So I think that I was very primed to learning about Bitcoin from a young age for a couple of reasons. So first and foremost, because I love technology, I would spend hours and hours on Wikipedia just learning about the new technologies that were being released. I loved military technology because that always seems to be the bleeding edge of where technological advancement and where technologies are developed. And then I think the second part of me that made me very primed for Bitcoin is that I had a huge problem with authority growing up. Whether that was my parents, whether that was my teachers, I was always extremely skeptical
I could
of,
definitely relate to that.
yeah, right? It's like, okay, we have these rules in place and I'm getting in trouble for this thing, but like, what's actually going on here, right? And so I always had like a very questioning mind. So I think that kind of made me very primed to become interested in something like Bitcoin because it is the intersection of technology and also the separation, for me, the separation of money and state, which is like there shouldn't be rulers that are setting the rules for the money that we use. And this is such an important thing that, and how we communicate value to each other. And instead, it shouldn't be eight folks in a room at the Federal Reserve kind of deciding that for the entire planet. There should be a better system. And yeah, so that's how I got into it. I came through the software world through some startup companies and became a product manager, which is really translating user requirements to the engineering team. And prioritizing like what we're going to build, and then finally landed on being an entrepreneur and starting my own coffee roasting business and cafes, which are situated home in Vancouver here.
That's awesome, man. And like I told you, just to let everyone else know, check out Funk Coffee Bar. It's located, obviously, like you said, in Vancouver, Canada, but the website, the products, everything is just so awesome. It's just like something pulled right from like the late 60s or the 70s or something. It's just beautiful. I love it. It's so cool. So props to you again on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just if I can say also, we have a Funk Coffee Bar in downtown Vancouver has really become the Bitcoin hub. So
Oh,
we host meetups there. You can buy Bitcoin there. We have a whole bunch of books on the shelf where you can learn about Bitcoin. We accept Bitcoin for coffee, so we have a ton of people coming in all the time to purchase coffee or sandwiches for Bitcoin, and
okay.
even the team receives some of their pay in Bitcoin as well. So we've really
Really?
tried to embody this new form of money and integrate it into our business at large.
Wow. Okay. So you are definitely on the pro crypto side. You are definitely a fan. And like you said, a big part of that goes into um, separating money and state, right? That's what you
Mhm.
mentioned. So you mentioned the Federal Reserve. What's your thoughts on the Federal Reserve? Just because obviously there's a lot of controversy there, but of course there's also a lot of um, like conspiracy theory talk surrounding the Federal Reserve. So what's your thoughts on that institution?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, like, as I said earlier, that we kind of rely on the Federal Reserve. Like, at the end of the day, we live in a world of lots of different currencies, right? Each country has their own sovereign currency, but
Absolutely.
because we price energy in US dollars, which is kind of the most valuable commodity, oil. Um, we every currency is effectively a derivative of the US dollar because I have to be able to purchase US dollars to be able to purchase valuable commodities. So even, as a coffee business, like if we get some packaging, manufactured in China for our coffee beans, then we're paying them in US dollars. So everything kind of goes through US dollars. So even
And why
though,
is that? Sorry to interrupt. Why is that? Is that just how history has made it become? Or
yeah, great question. So the reason for that kind of stems back to World War One, World War Two, the U.S. kind of being on its own island that has separated itself from these global conflicts and hasn't taken as many losses at home, which allowed them to develop a stronger economy. At the end of World War II, there was a treaty made with the Saudis in order to be able to, this would be Bretton Woods, and this was for them to be able to price oil when they were the number one producers of oil, and oil was the most valuable commodity in an industrializing economy. They said, okay, you guys only sell oil in US dollars, and then everyone is going to have to come purchase US dollars from us in order to be able to, purchase oil. And when you think about it, the US, we think about them being, they used to be this big manufacturing hub where, they sold a lot of vehicles and whatnot globally. They still have these, huge technology companies like, Apple and OpenAI and whatnot that are exporting technology. But the number one export from the US is actually dollars, because the rest of the world needs dollars in order to be able to transact in a global economy. So this is kind of the situation that we find ourselves in today, which gives the Federal Reserve such an exorbitant amount of power, and kind of perpetuates the U.S. hegemony to this day. And it's what allows the U.S. to be able to run such significant deficits. The amount of debt that the U.S. has today is obscene, right? Like there's
yeah,
it,
what is
it,
like?
it,
I forget what the number is, but it's 37 trillion.
Exactly, yeah, and at that number, if you actually break that down per capita to each citizen in the U.S., I think it's 113,000 US dollars per citizen or per resident, per tax resident that lives in the U.S. So we're talking about, not just a car, but like we're like roaming up towards house territory, and that's how much public debt. This isn't even including private debt of, how many people have, loans with the banks for their mortgages. This is just strictly public debt. And we kind of find ourselves in a situation where, the world is getting more and more crazy every day. It feels like, that like even like before COVID, like basically since the 2008 financial crisis, that it feels like there's more extremism, there's more wars, endless wars, and we're finding ourselves, wondering like what the hell is going on. And as Bitcoiners, looping this back to Bitcoin, we believe that it's all rooted within the money, and the money being broken, which kind of leads to all of these second and third order consequences. So when you look at something like the Federal Reserve, and you see these folks that they kind of sit in the room, and everyone's hanging on to every last word that comes out of Jerome Powell's mouth to say, hey, what are interest rates going to be, in the next coming months, and that kind of like whiptails the markets around. It is this very interesting system that has kind of formed over just because of all of these different historical events, and yet, yeah, we can get into that as well.
Sure, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Two quick questions. So, would Canada's Federal Reserve equivalent be the Bank of Canada? Would you say that essentially? Okay. Yeah. And another question that's kind of off the cuff, but kind of a deep question. So, when, for example, we're talking about the states being in debt, when we talk about that 37 trillion debt, who is this country indebted to the rest of the world, or is it based on how much money they've printed, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the U.S. Debt, and especially the national debt, how it works is that they issue bonds. So it's either going to be treasury bonds, which are things like you don't have to be paid back over the course of 10 or 30 years. And then you have things like T-bills, which are much shorter duration bonds. So let's say, I'm issuing a bond. Let's say I'm the USA, I'm issuing a bond. And, Jordan, you want to be able to, save your money in something that's going to give you some sort of return, but is also going to be relatively safe. You could purchase a bond off of me. You could lend me $100. I'll issue you a bond, and I'll say, hey, I'm going to pay this bond back, this $100, and I'm going to include 3% on it in 1 year. And so in a year's time, when the bond comes to the maturity, I'm going to pay you back $103. And who's actually purchasing these bonds is other countries. So those are going to be the number one holder of bonds, which is going to be sovereigns. So, China, Japan, countries in Europe, Canada, they're going to be purchasing these bonds in order to, be able to get US dollars. And then other purchasers might be individuals, it could be institutions. But effectively, with the US dollar being the global reserve currency, if you have additional capital that you want to protect yourselves or get some sort of return on it, right? Like, you don't just want to have $1 billion sitting in the bank doing nothing, because, depending on how you measure it, it's inflating away anywhere between 3 and 15% every single year. You want to be able to preserve that purchasing power into the future. So the safest way to do that is to purchase a bond, and the US will effectively never default on these bonds because they're able to pay people back with freshly printed money. So when you're able to, like, imagine I was able to, issue you that bond, but when I have to pay you back $103, if I don't have that $103 from, my business at FUNK Coffee, or in the case of the US, tax receipts, my other option would be to, print 3 freshly new dollars, or 103 freshly new dollars if I have zero of it, and give that back to you, which is going to inflate the money supply, which is going to cause inflation in prices, kind of what we're seeing today.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you very much. So, okay, so going back to Bitcoin and crypto, where would you like to start there?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before the pod, like, it's such a huge question, and it's so multidisciplinary. You can look at it from so many angles, whether it's through the lens of economics, or whether it's the lens of computer science, whether it's lens of philosophy. But I think that maybe the best place to start is to be able to build up to the concept of Bitcoin, is answering the question of what is money. Because it's this tool that we use every single day in order to be able to, put food on the table, be able to get from our job. We trade our time and our energy for money. So you can look at it in a lot of different lenses. In one form, money is claims on human time. Human time is the only truly scarce resource that we have, both individually and collectively. And let's say you hire a cleaner to come over to your house and clean up, and you're paying her for that. You're effectively paying them, trading them human time, and then they can take that human time and then go spend it at the grocery store, where they buy a quarter pound of beef, and that beef is coming from a farmer who had to spend time to be able to build a farm, raise the cattle, and slaughter them in order to be able to bring that beef to put on your table. So it's a system that we use of value in order to be able to represent claims on human time. It's a tool in the sense that, like, it solves this problem, this emergent problem in economics called the double coincidence of wants. So you might hear about people talking about, we were originally on the barter system, and then we, moved to various forms of money. I'm not so sure how true that was. I think that we always had to use some sort of medium of exchange, even in primitive societies. The moment you kind of expand a society past a certain number of people, and you can't trust that someone is going to actually return the favor if you're just giving them something today.
I was just going to say that. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, even like within like a family unit, right? Like, let's say you have, you have a family of 4, you have parents and 2 kids. And, I'm telling my kid that it's like, hey, if you wash the dishes, for the next few weeks, I'm going to buy you a PlayStation or something like that. That is kind of a system of exchange and some sort of barter, but it operates on the premise that there is a high level of trust. So when you're in a society or within a community where you have a high level of trust, you can use things like credit. And it's like, hey, I'll rub your back today, you rub my back tomorrow. The moment you expand beyond a certain number of people, I think that, the maximum number of people that you can realistically know and be able to trust is, it's quite small. It's like 100 to 150 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And these primitives, it does. Yes.
Depending on the society, I guess. Yeah.
Totally. Right.
Yeah.
Once you move beyond that and you move towards civilization level, and you're talking about, 10 to 150 million people, how do we actually transact and trade with one another without using, in something like a barter system? So, for example, I make clay pots, you're a fisherman, and I need something to eat tonight. And I come to you and you say, okay, like, I need some fish. And you're like, I have clay pots to be able to, trade for that. But you say, I already have too many clay pots. I don't need those right now. Right. I need vegetables instead. So I have to go to a third person and say, hey, I need vegetables. Do you have clay pots? And, maybe I do find someone, I trade for those vegetables, and then I come and bring you those vegetables, and then trade for the fish that you have to be able to put food on my table. So in that case, the vegetables are effectively the money here, right? Because it's something that I purchase not for consumption myself, but in order to trade for something else, right? Now, this is obviously an extremely inefficient way of being able to, have an economy. We sell coffee as a business, but maybe I don't need legal services at the time, and I can't just trade coffee for, some sort of future claim on legal services from, some lawyer that operates in the towers above us, right? So money kind of emerges as a technology to be able to make trade more efficient, right? So if we find something that, that is desirable to both of us, and we both keep some sort of stockpile of this individually, then we can use that money to be able to trade with each other, where I can purchase the fish off of you, or you could purchase clay pots from me. But we don't necessarily have to have the same goods that each other have, right? So in primitive societies, money kind of took lots of different shapes and forms. At different times, on the island of Yap, it took the shape of these things called rye stones, and they were these limestone circles with a hole in the middle because you could carve them, and those would basically function as money for their society, because limestone on the island of Yap was very difficult to be able to find. You had to go and sail to another island to be able to get limestone to bring it back to Yap in order to be able to trade with one another, or have money, right? Money has taken the form of seashells, which were carved into beads that would become necklaces that people would trade with one another. And money would eventually converge on gold, which the reason why gold made such a good money is that it was very hard to be able to get more of, and it's also basically indestructible. Like, it doesn't tarnish. You could it's somewhat malleable, so you could stamp it into coins and things of that nature. So the question, after we answer kind of what is money, is like, what makes a good money? And money has basically two functions. So you want to be able to store your claims on human times, or your own time, right? Like, if I went out and worked a job and got money in return, I'm effectively storing my time in something that I want to use at some time in the future at a later date. So that's the first function of money, is to store my energy over time. And then the second one is to be able to, move that energy over space. So I need to be able to send that money to somebody else to be able to exchange goods with them, which is especially important in a globalized economy where, I could be sitting in my underwear on my laptop and be able to order some stuff off of Amazon and have that delivered to my house the next day, right? And when we look at the properties of money, we kind of gauge them on 6 or 7 different attributes. So it comes down to the durability of the money. So things like, for example, vegetables in our example of us trying to trade with one another make a pretty bad money, because the problem with vegetables is that they'll rot, right? So I'm not going to be storing, like, it's not serving the purpose of money in the sense that it wants to store my value into the future. Sure, it might store my value for like 3 days, maybe a week if I'm lucky, in the refrigerator, but it's not actually going to store that for the long term. So it has to be durable. It has to be fungible. So a lot of people these days, they actually use real estate as money. People use houses. They purchase a house both to live in, but a lot of people purchase houses because they think it's a good investment and it's going to protect their value into the future. The problem with that, though, is that houses are not fungible. And what fungible means is that every single piece of money is worth the same thing. So to be able to buy or to sell a house, you have to kind of have the right buyer. You have to that likes the location, that likes the square footage and such. So houses don't make good money because they're not fungible. They do a great job of preserving, or they have done a great job in an inflationary economy of protecting your purchasing power into the future. And so that's why we've been incentivized to kind of store our wealth in housing and use it as money. But they don't make great money because they're not fungible. They're not very liquid. It's kind of hard to be able to buy and sell a house, and you have to deal with real estate agents and all the fees that come along with that. Money has to be portable, so I have to be able to move it from one location to another. This is why digital money is so fascinating, because it brings the portability of money to the digital realm, where I'm able to send value across the internet to someone who I've never met before, in order to be able to trade with them and exchange goods. And, in the example of Yap with the rye stones, a lot of these rye stones that were brought over from a neighboring island were actually quite large. And they were these huge stones, which would take, many people to be able to lift and move. So that isn't a very portable money, right? It needs to be verifiable. So I need to be able to take a look at the money and say, like, yes, this is legitimate. It's the reason why coinage became so popular, because stamping, cutting money became very, it's a pretty industrial process. You need some heavy duty equipment to it, and then being able to stamp the king's face on the money as well. Also, you needed some sort of carving. So the verifiability money, that's why. Oh yes, you got the rye stones up on screen here. Exactly.
Is that them? The big? They were that big?
They were that big, exactly. And they were so big that
Wow.
they were actually hard to be able to move around. So what they would do is they would say, they would have a community gathering, and they would say, okay, Curtis wants to buy, this plot of land, and exchange, Jordan who owns this rye stone that is sitting here, Curtis is now the owner of that rye stone in exchange. So they're so big, they weren't portable. But everyone in the community kind of kept track of like who owned which rye stone, and what the value of them was. They're also not, they're also not very fungible, because like each rye stone, depending on the size, would be worth something different from one another. So, definitely not suggesting that we go back to using rye stones as money, because it has all of these problems as we continue to go down the list of what makes good money. Money has to be very divisible. So you have to be able to, if I have a gold coin worth $1,000 and I want to go buy like a $3 hamburger at McDonald's, like that isn't going to be very valuable. Like I'm not going to bring a knife with me and just like shave off a few clippings, and we're going to, weigh that to ensure that I'm paying the $3 in exchange for that hamburger, right? So it has to be divisible. And I think the most important quality of or property of money is that it's scarce. If we were in an economy where we're using, let's say, go back to that example of vegetables as money, then who becomes the richest person in the city? It's like the person who grows vegetables, right? Because they have the scarce good, or the good that everyone wants, to be able to get the other things, whether that's tools or fish or clay pots or whatever it is. And then that will have the incentive of everyone becoming a vegetable farmer, because everyone wants to be able to, literally grow money on trees.
The world just wouldn't work, right?
Yeah, totally, right. And it's ironic that we learn as children that money isn't supposed to grow on trees, and yet we live in a world where the money has a complete detachment from anything that is actually scarce or hard to be able to create. Money is created today through the practice of issuing loans to people, which is effectively a couple strokes on a keyboard. And that's where money comes from in a fiat system in which we live in today.
When did crypto start? I mean, I'm not sure if we're there yet in your method of presenting this, but was Bitcoin the first, or was it just the first successful one? Do you know how crypto came to be? Because you're talking about trying to find a fungible, a divisible, essentially the best kind of money or currency, right? So is obviously crypto is being made in hopes and thoughts that it is the better currency, it is the better way, right?
Yeah. So I think that what you said is the it was the first, it wasn't necessarily the first invention, but it was the first invention that worked. So,
Okay.
um, Bitcoin had a long history of people since the creation of the internet, effectively, we were trying to figure out how to be able to create internet money and be able to transmit value from one person to another without intermediaries. And there was a whole bunch of different projects that tried to be able to solve this problem leading up to the creation of Bitcoin. One good example is a guy named David Chaum in I'd say it's like the late 1990s. He created something called Chaumian eCash, which was basically a cryptographic way of being able to store money on my computer and be able to send that across the internet. It goes so as far to, this technology that he created. He had partnerships with Microsoft, and it was going to be launched and be natively integrated into Windows 98. So
Okay.
when Windows 98 came out, they were planning for it to be able to support Chaumian eCash. And he basically had all of the support of the various technology companies and computer manufacturers, whether that was Dell, Compaq, HP at the time, to be able to support this new form of money. Unfortunately, the exact story of why this net was never allowed to happen, I don't necessarily think that is known. But the theory is that that the government did not want a private company to be the issuer of money. And going back to the Federal Reserve, right? Like the U.S. having the global reserve currency, it has a lot of really huge privileges that they're able to afford, because it basically means that the U.S. is able to get goods and services from every other country in the world in exchange for a couple of button clicks on the keyboard, right? They're really getting something for nothing here. Of course, that does have to be paid back at some point, but again, you can pay that back with a couple of more button clicks. And the Federal Reserve is effectively, what they're trying to do is they're trying to look at data and try to manage the economy and try to maintain a system where they have a stable economy, they have strong employment, and they have low inflation, so that people can actually trust the money and that it doesn't violate the principle of money needing to be scarce too much. And so that's why they set this inflation target of 2%, which is kind of the most that you can steal from someone on a yearly basis without them getting too upset and causing a revolution. So, people have been trying to create digital money for a very long time, and the 2008 financial crisis was kind of where things came to a heat, where we had all of these financial derivatives and mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations that basically what was happening is that the banks were taking on too much risk. They were launching products, and there was fraud effectively that was going on, that they were saying that these loans that they were making to prospective homeowners were safer than they were, and everyone was purchasing these products, and bankers on Wall Street were getting rich because there was all these commissions, and at some point it all came crashing down, right? And there's countless stories and movies about the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
And what we saw in the 2008 financial crisis was, at the end of the day, these banks were they were labeled as too big to fail, in the sense that they would have these major banks going bust means that people's savings were going to be wiped out, with the bank itself, and it was going to cause economic systemic issues. So when push came to shove and the government was faced with the decision of allowing the banks to fail, especially the ones who had taken on too much risk, um, and causing these potentially systemic issues, or to be able to bail them out and send $300 billion to be able to support the balance sheets of the banks and for them to be able to pay back whatever in default loans that they had on their books. They chose the latter option because that is less painful in the short term. And this is kind of a theme that we can see throughout the course of history, that when we give people the power to be able to make that choice of like, hey, should we experience pain now and let a zombie company, let a company that's taken on too much risk, let that fail? Or should we prop them up with the creation of new money and being able to inject capital to be able to support that organization? We always seem to choose the option of deferring pain into the future. And this is effectively how we found ourselves in the amount of debt that we have today. It's always, for me personally, right? Like, I operate a business and, sometimes, we have payroll coming up today. And if we had the option to make more purchases to be able to grow the business earlier this week, and then use the money printer that we have in the back office in order to be able to make payroll today, I'm probably going to choose that option 10 times out of 10, right? And this is the incentive that we've set up, right? So the creation of Bitcoin, so the 2008 financial crisis happens. And in 2009, a white paper is released, which is on these what they call like the cypherpunk forums, which is this group of this online community of cryptographers and computer scientists that are trying to be able to create digital money. And there's a pseudonymous person by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto that launches the Bitcoin white paper and basically says, hey, I've solved the problem of digital scarcity, and we basically can use this. This is a framework for creating a network where we're able to transact value with one another online. And so a year later, or 6 months later, he codes the thing up himself and then creates Bitcoin. And in the Genesis block of Bitcoin, he encodes a message, which is Chancellor on the bailout of banks, Chancellor on the brink of the second bailouts for the banks. And this was the headline of a newspaper out of the UK, kind of signaling that the reason why this was created was because of the bank bailouts and because of being able to create money to be able to effectively operate crony capitalism, where at some point you become too big to fail, which incentivizes you to take on a bunch of additional risk, even if that isn't necessarily a wise decision. And it doesn't matter anyways, because when you do eventually fail, you're going to get bailed out by the government, who has the money printer in their back office. So Bitcoin was created, and a lot of people were actually skeptical. Especially, we had seen all of these different attempts at creating a digital cash online fail, because it was usually some sort of centralized institution that was in charge of it, and then the governments would never allow it. So the reason why it worked when every single other one of the attempts to be able to create digital money did not was because of its decentralization, because there was no one company, there was no one person, there was no, to shut the network down, you would have to find all of the different people which are running the Bitcoin network and then be able to, confiscate their computers or, tell them to shut it down. And you can kind of see parallels of this in did you ever use Napster, Jordan?
I remember like Morpheus and Kazaa
And because
and
yeah.
a few of those. I don't think I ever used Napster though.
Sure. Yeah. So, when the internet was created, we figured out, how to be able to share digital files of music with each other without necessarily paying for it, right? Like that's what the internet created. It created digital abundance. Like if I'm to send you an email, I'm not actually sending you that message and it's not in my possession anymore, right? We're actually just making a copy of that. My email server has that email, your email server has that email. And the same thing went for music, right? That like I could download music from something like the Apple Store and be able to make a copy of that and share that with someone who wanted to download it, which of course got the record industry and the movie industry all up in arms, fairly enough, because they operated on they're coming from a world where like to be able to view a movie, you would have to go and like rent it from Blockbuster. And sure, like I could take that home and make a copy of it on my VHS player, but that's a very different scenario of being able to do it at scale with the internet, where I could immediately, with the stroke of a keyboard, be able to create 1 million copies of this for people to be able to view for free. So the internet created this digital abundance. And the thing that the cypherpunks and the cryptographers are trying to figure out is actually how to create digital scarcity. Like, how could I be able to send you something and not be in possession of that anymore? That like, I don't have access to that movie anymore. Okay. I don't have access to that money anymore. And where was I going with this? What was the question again? We're talking about the creation of Bitcoin. So, yes, we were talking about Napster and LimeWire and all this. So,
correct.
So Napster came out, and it was a company that was running, which facilitated peer-to-peer sharing of music files, right? They got shut down by the record industry because Metallica came out and said, hey, this is bullshit. Yeah. Like, people are getting our stuff for free, right? And fair enough. And they were able to shut it down because there was a company that was running the software that coordinated the exchange of these files, right? Then there was Kazaa, then there was LimeWire, and they were a little bit more decentralized in the sense that they were able to create a software similar to Napster, but they weren't actually handling the file transfer themselves. They were just kind of creating the marketplace where I could like say, hey, here's the file. I'm going to send it to Joe, and the company LimeWire or Kazaa is going to facilitate and coordinate that exchange. Those also failed. There is no Kazaa or LimeWire today because, again, there was someone that you could go to be able to shut the system down. Then came along BitTorrent, and BitTorrent right. created after these file sharing technologies, still survives today. And the reason why it still survives today is because it was not a software, it was not a technology, it wasn't a person per se, it was a protocol. So it was a protocol, which meaning a format of how we are able to facilitate file sharing over the internet, without a centralized coordinator. There is not one tracker that keeps track of all the different files in the network. There is not one database. You can start a tracker. I can start a tracker. I can share files with someone, and we're all speaking in the same language because we all know what the same rules are for being able to facilitate this transaction with no centralized coordinating authority. Now, BitTorrent, when it came out, because of how decentralized it was, and because it was just a protocol of a way of us being able to share files on the internet without some sort of centralized coordinator, couldn't be shut down. And this is very similar to the story of Chaumian eCash and Bitcoin, in the sense that Chaumian eCash was created in a way where there was a company that was behind it who had partners within the technology ecosystem. And when they were about to launch it, they got the tap on the shoulder and saying, hey, this is not kosher. We still need control of the US dollar. We will not allow for this to be launched. We're going to shut it down. And Bitcoin, what it really solved is, like, people like to think of Bitcoin as a technology. They like to think of it almost as like a tech company, where it's a way of being able to send value and send money over the internet. But I think it's the wrong mental model. You have to think of it more like a protocol, in the sense that it's more of a set of rules that if a whole bunch of people run this software on their computers, they're able to send money to each other. And the only way to shut that down would be to go into the houses of, 1 million people around the world and tell them to turn off their nodes all at the same time. So it has this survivability because of its decentralized nature, which allows it to be able to actually be money in something which sovereign nations are not going to want to let control of, because it gives them so much power to be able to fund the agendas and the special interests from a political perspective that voters might be asking for. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So what is, like, what are these crypto vehicles, or like, and are they all essentially the same in like form and format?
Yeah. So Bitcoin was the first. It was basically the demonstration that this was possible. And there was a whole bunch of copycats that kind of came after it, where they were like, okay, this is great, but let's build upon this. Let's make this idea better. Maybe, Bitcoin is too slow, and so we actually need to make it faster. Or maybe Bitcoin doesn't have enough transactions capacity to be able to scale to the globe, so we need to increase the capacity of the network. And people started thinking about, like, okay, well, what are the other applications of this new technology where we're able to send verifiably something that is scarce, that I can be in possession of something digital and be able to send that to someone else where I am no longer in possession of it. So a lot of use cases kind of came out of that. People were like, oh, maybe we could put like art on the internet, and we could trade digital art with one another, where one person is not in possession of it anymore. Or a lot of ideas have come out about maybe we can create titles for property that exist in the real world, in the way that I could assume ownership of your house is that you transfer me the deed of that property over the internet, and now someone else is the actual owner. So there was a whole bunch of ideas that came from, it's like, okay, now we have this thing, digital scarcity, what else can we create of that? And there's I don't know, probably around a few 100,000 different cryptocurrencies that have been created after Bitcoin, and each one of them is supposedly solving some sort of other problem, whether that is scale or speed, or digital titles, or art. But the challenge with it is that so first and foremost, going back to a centralized entity creating something, if you have the ability, if something is not sufficiently decentralized, then it can be shut down, right? Or it can be changed. One of the most popular other cryptocurrencies that has been created, named Ethereum, is
Right.
their value proposition was that they wanted to create make Bitcoin isn't programmable enough. So we want to make it more. We want to make it like an online programming language. And Ethereum is the gas of which you pay for computing power on this network. The challenge with that is that Ethereum Foundation is it's a foundation, so there's a company that's supporting it. Two, there's leaders within those foundations that actually are able to influence the decisions to very important things, such as the supply, such as like how we come to consensus as to who owns what. And thirdly, a lot of these products are created with what they call like pre-mines. So the Ethereum Foundation, when they first started, they actually owned 70% of the Ethereum on the network, and they've been able to sell that off to purchasers of Ethereum who are speculating on it in order to be able to fund their own operations. And this, by and large, is the majority of other cryptocurrencies that have been created after Bitcoin. The way that Bitcoin works is that it requires, if you want to be able to interact with the network without trusting a third party to be able to, run a server to be able to, for you to interact with the Bitcoin network, you have to run what's called like a node at your home. And a node can be spun up with a computer purchased off of Amazon for like $150. So if for $150, I am able to be a node on the Bitcoin network and be able to send, receive, and hold Bitcoin permissionlessly, where no one can tell me who I can and cannot send to. There is no censorship that is available, that is possible on the network. And what that does is it creates a lot of decentralization where you have millions of people running nodes at home, so that they can secure the network and be able to interact with the network without anyone telling them or giving them permission to be able to make a transaction. Contrast this to many of the other cryptocurrencies that we're looking to be able to scale the capacity of the network or make it faster. A lot of them run in data centers in Amazon Web Services, or you need to purchase $50,000 of equipment to be able to run it yourself at home. So what that does is it gives a fewer number of choke points that if you actually wanted to go and the government wanted to shut down a network like Solana, it would be a matter of tapping the Solana Foundation on the shoulder and letting them know that they want the service shut down, and anyone who wants to spin up a node has to invest a serious amount of capital to be able to build basically like a small data center at home to be able to interact permissionlessly with the network. So going back to the BitTorrent analogy, by making the ability to interact with the network cheap was one of the principles which allowed it to be able to be so decentralized, and the reason why it can't be shut down.
And what does shitcoin refer to? Are these like is that just like throwing shade on different cryptos that aren't very popular, or is it just saying like, oh, there's so much shit out there, there's shit coins, or it could refer to any coin or any like, or what's going on behind that?
So shitcoins are usually some sort of grifting mechanism that, even like the
Trump has a shitcoin, I hear.
Exactly, right? Like it's a way to be able to launch something on the network and promote it, and hopefully people will buy it so that you're able to sell off your own holdings and extract wealth from whoever is unfortunate enough to believe in what you're creating as being good money. And, it's kind of like, when we talked about like the properties of money, that scarcity is one of the most important things, because we need whatever we use as a medium of exchange to be very difficult to be able to create. And the reason for that is that if everyone's able to create it, like if we're just using rocks as money, then like I could just go to the beach and I'm going to purchase all of your bread. No one's going to have, provide value to that. Shitcoins are kind of similar to rocks in that sense, where anyone can go and create one on the internet. There's websites that you can go and within 15 minutes you can spin up your own shitcoin and start a live stream. And there's people that have gone on Twitch and they threaten to kill themselves unless people purchase their coin. And effectively, it's all like a grift and a marketing attempt and really affinity scam, where it's a sense like we have created something similar to this technology and therefore it has the same properties and it has the same value and it's going to be worth trillions of dollars one day. But at the end of the day, because they're not, like I said, there's hundreds of thousands of different coins that are in existence. And, we could end this pod right now and go spin up, Jordan coin and, hope that people buy it and we could promote it on this podcast, which is effectively, what the Trump family has done. Because they are, he's the most well-known man in the world, that he's able to create Trump coin, and people are going to speculate that this year is going to be very valuable one day. But because the supply is not necessarily constrained, there can only be 21 million Bitcoin. With shitcoins, I could say, okay, the supply could grow over time, or I can choose what the supply is going to be, or I could give more money to myself. It's not really solving the problems that Bitcoin set out to address in the first place, which is that money should not be able to be printed out of thin air, because it has all of these, externalities about how people perceive the value of money, because it needs to be scarce. You kind of remove all of those qualities to it. So shitcoins is really just, it's a derogatory term that, is given to things that people believe are just grifts and don't actually have value, and are people just trying to extract money and wealth from, which is usually retail investors.
And what are you like? Are you getting anything if you're buying these shit coins? Or
I mean, you are technically getting the you are getting the digital scarcity. Like if I were to go out and purchase Trump coin, I'm going to be ownership in possession of 1,000 Trump coin that no one can actually take off of me. But is that going to be worth anything, right?
Can you use that? Do you know if you can use the Trump coin on anything? Like,
you can use the Trump coin for basically just speculation. You can use it. You can use it to buy it now, and hopefully someone, a greater fool will come and purchase off you for a higher price in the future.
Right.
I think there was something. So there was a dinner that happened about 6 months ago that like the top holders of Trump coin, like the top 20, were invited to some private dinner with the president, where if you came in and like you basically came to a dinner, he like came out, he spoke for 15 minutes and then he left, and then enjoy the steak and lobster. But it's almost just like a marketing tool to be like, hey, let's like pump the price on this and like let's make this really attractive. If you want to come meet me, you can put $100 million into this market. And meanwhile, kind of in the back is Eric and Donald Jr. are probably selling those more Trump coins onto the market to be able to take more wealth of that for themselves. And with that money, they're probably going to go and purchase things that are actually valuable, like maybe more hotels or real estate or gold or Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, they're trying to pump almost everything. They got the Trump phone. I don't know how well that's doing. I mean, he's done the ties for years. He's got Trump watches now. I'm sure they're made in China.
Totally.
So I think you alluded to it earlier, but what about these like NFTs? What are those? Because is that just like a digital art or something? Because I used to see them everywhere a few years ago. They seemed super huge. And I feel like that really died out. Really, I could be wrong. I feel like that died out really quick. I don't hear about them anymore, really. But I remember there were all sorts of weird kinds. Like you can buy, like, they got into sports NFTs, like where you can buy a specific dunk by Michael Jordan in a specific game, a specific dunk, and it's like, well, I mean, what is that? Like, that seems so fucking stupid, man. But like, it seems so big at some point for a little while there.
I mean, you're not wrong that it's fucking stupid. Like, it's NFTs at the end of the day were a way to be able to claim ownership of a specific image or video or dunk by Michael Jordan online.
Like, can you even do that? Like, is that even legal or possible?
That's the thing, right? Like, so yes, you own, a picture of a monkey on your computer, but it's a digital image. So I can go, you're like, hey, I got this monkey, this is mine. But like, I can literally take a screenshot of that and also have the monkey on my computer. So like, what is the actual scarcity there, right? With Michael Jordan's dunk, like, does that mean that you own the rights to that video? No. I'm sure that, YouTube or, TSN is still going to be able to show that dunk online without paying you royalties, unless you have some sort of agreement with whatever the network is that owned the rights to that footage, that if you are in ownership of that NFT, then you can, every time someone uses that clip, then they have to pay you royalties. I don't know. Maybe you could create some sort of system like that, but that's not what happened. What actually happened is that NFTs became very popular in 2020 and 2021 when everyone was sitting on their ass at home and collecting free checks of free money from the government instead of working, because we were all locked down during COVID. And we're like, what should we spend this money on? Like, what are all of these different things that we can speculate online? And there's a reason why, stocks, housing, NFTs, Bitcoin, the reason why every type of financialized asset became, so went up in price so much during 2020 and 2021, it's because we printed more money and we helicoptered this money into people's pockets sitting at home, right? So when stocks are hitting an all-time high, when gold is hitting an all-time high, when Bitcoin's hitting an all-time high, when NFTs are hitting an all-time high, you have to ask yourself the question, are these assets actually becoming more valuable, or is the thing that we're trading for these assets becoming less valuable because there's more of it in the economy now, right? This isn't a function of dunks of Michael Jordan somehow actually having value. This is actually a symptom of us watching our money die in front of us in real time, right? As we continue to enter a world where governments are, spending beyond their means, and no one is going to be voting for austerity. Like, we are so in debt. In the U.S., Social Security, to be able to pay out pensioners, is going to be bankrupt by 2035, meaning there is not enough tax receipts coming in from individuals and the private sector in order to be able to fund all of the liabilities to be able to pay out pensioners that their money is promised to them at this point. So what are they going to do in that circumstance, right? Well, they're not going to just say, oh, sorry, Bill, I know that you paid into this pension fund for the last 50 years, but we don't have your money, so we're not going to be able to give it to you. No, Bill's not going to vote for that, right? Bill's going to vote for the guy who says, actually, no, your pension is available, and we're going to use this little magic trick of being able to add more money into the system to be able to, actually pay you the money that we owe you. But the insidious thing about this is, yes, Bill is getting paid his money on his pension, but it's worth less, right? it's not the value of every dollar that he gets from his pension is not going to be the same value of it because there is more money in the system now, right? So, you're not going to be able to afford the same type of lifestyle that you would in, $20, $35 that you would in, the year 2000 or something like that. Like, you remember when like we used to have this concept of like being a millionaire and like, wow, like being a millionaire, that's like a crazy thing. You
That'd
must
be
be
wild,
you
right?
would be so rich to be a
Yeah.
millionaire. And like these days, like being a millionaire is like, oh, I can afford like a 2-bedroom apartment in Vancouver and that's it. You know what I mean? Like the meaning of these words, of how we used to be able to gauge wealth has lost value because our money has been losing value. And like you can like look at like you can say, oh well, Bill's pension is going to be like inflation adjusted, so like we're taking these numbers into account. But there's a lot of manipulation that happens on how we measure inflation, how we measure growth in the economy. If you look at the way that we used to measure inflation in the 1980s and what the baskets of goods that we used as the Federal Reserve to be able to say like, how is the economy performing and so on, you'll see that the former measurements of it put inflation at a lot higher than the measure that we use today. And the reason for that is that inflation and CPI are basically based off of a basket of goods of like, what does the average person want to be able to, what do they purchase on like a daily basis in order to be able to live their lives, and what is the price of those goods and how much is that going up in price over time, to be able to create this key metric that we kind of control the rest of our economy on. But when you live in a world where things become more expensive, you start changing your consumer preferences. So in the 1970s and 1980s, beef used to be a big part of the CPI because it was something that a lot of people purchased. But as beef got more expensive and our money became worth less, people started consuming a lot more chicken. So what they did is, as the CPI over time, they removed beef, or the vast majority of beef from it, and replaced it with a cheaper protein, such as chicken. And so we see this effect happening, and we're using these statistics and measurements to be able to control our economy. And but what we see is that the quality of things, that is the quality of the basket of goods that we use to build up to what gets included in the CPI, becomes less over time. And then we wonder why we're in these health epidemics where people are consuming more and more carbs. It's like the sad reality is that a lot of people can't afford to be able to put healthy food on the table. And yet the inflation statistic says, well, you know what, they're getting enough calories. So, this is how we're using to measure the price of inflation over time. The price of inflation is only really effective if you look at it as to something that is actually scarce. And if you look at something like priced in gold, so I think that what we're doing is we're using the wrong measuring stick by measuring things in dollar and measuring things. This is like going to a construction site. You're trying to build a house, but every day you're changing the length of your measuring tape, right? And that's like, ladies and gentlemen, this is what your economy looks like, right? When your measuring tape is constantly changing because because dollars are printed and because we have to print these dollars because we're so in debt, then what are all the distortions that are going to be created in the economy as a result of that, right? So yeah, it's a total clusterfuck is the only way to be able to put it. And what Bitcoin represents in this is a return to sound money, a return to money which is created with rules and not rulers. It's a return to something that has money that is absolutely scarce, right? I really like this quote where from Jeff Booth, who wrote The Price of Tomorrow. He says, when money is abundant, everything becomes scarce. When money is scarce, everything becomes abundant. And if we walk the dog on that, like if we go back to the example of like, what if we used rocks for money, right? And like you could trade rocks for jewelry, and you could trade rocks for cars and real estate and things that are actually valuable. Do you think there's going to be any real estate left? Like, do you think there's going to be any food left? Like when everyone could just like go pick up rocks on the ground and then be able to trade that for actual valuable goods and services? On the other hand, you know, the reason why the world converged upon gold is because gold takes work and time and energy to be able to dig it out of the ground. And that makes it, the difficulty of doing that made it a good money because it was scarce. And when we went on the gold standard, when you look throughout history, this is when the Industrial Revolution kicked off. This is when the Enlightenment period kicked off. This is when we saw some of the most amount of human progress and flourishing in the history of civilization. And if you look at times when we were using soft money and money that was easy to make, then what you see is a lot of destabilization, and you see countries falling into war, and you see countries falling into poverty. And there's a million stories throughout the history of time of this happening, because at the end of the day, the story of humans wanting to get something for nothing is as old as time itself, right? Like everyone wants more stuff. We have an insatiable desire to be able to, get more stuff for ourselves, right? Like, and you can go through all of the great empires throughout human history, and what you'll see, whether it's Rome, whether it's China, whether it's the Holy Roman Empire, whether it's the British Empire leading into World War One, and whether it's the U.S. hegemony that we have in existence today, you'll see that as they start to live beyond their means, they figure out creative ways of being able to depreciate the value of money. And that causes a whole bunch of consequences, which in the end are usually tied towards the collapse of that empire itself.
Okay. I mean, this measuring of debt with these countries is just getting so, like, especially with the States, like it's getting so out of hand. Like, what are the odds that they're ever going to try to rectify that properly? Like, is that people in finance or like world finance and stuff, like, do they, like, I don't know, man. Like, I think it's just going to keep growing, no? Or is there a hope that, you know, maybe now with technology or something, or somehow, or some sort of innovation or some sort of change or breakthrough that will allow, you know, such, you know, money to flow in a way where debt can be paid off in such a crazy amount?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, they have two options, right? When you have a ton of debt, you can either pay off that debt or you can default on it. Those are your two options. Governments have a third option, is they can print money and be able to devalue their currency in order to pay off that debt. And they're going to choose that choice 10 times out of 10. I don't think, like, I think 2008 was a perfect example of governments being faced with that reality of banks have taken on too much risk. They're insolvent. They are going to fail, and that's going to cause a lot of pain in the economy. What should we do about that? Should we let them fail, or should we print money and bail them out? And they're going to choose print money every single time. There is no question about that. And so what this does is that it creates incentives for individuals, corporations, investment funds, other governments, to be able to find assets which protect their purchasing power. And usually these are going to be hard assets. These are going to be assets which are that you cannot print out of thin air. So if you look at like Canada's a perfect example, right? Like we have a housing crisis here. I don't know what it's like in Thunder Bay, but I know in Vancouver we've been experiencing really extreme inflation for the last 20 years when it comes to our housing market. And there's a couple reasons for that. So the first is that Vancouver is kind of like, it's surrounded by water to the west, mountains to the north, a border to the south, and more mountains to the east. So there isn't that much land to go around effectively, right? So land in Vancouver is quite scarce. And because it's a scarce asset, investors, and whether that's an individual, whether that's an institution, look at it. They look at this world where the math is saying that more money is going to have to be printed by the governments. So where can I store my money? Well, one of the hardest things to be able to do, something that takes time and energy and work, and can be used as money, is land or real estate, right? It's you can print more dollars, but you can't print more houses. So what do you think is going to happen to the price of the houses over time? So individuals are incentivized to protect themselves and protect their savings and their purchasing power by purchasing the hardest assets that they are aware of, right? It's the same reason why gold is mooning right now. Like it's gone from, $2,000 a couple years ago to, almost $4,000 today. And what this is telling us, if we look at prices as signals, and if we look at prices as information, what it's telling us is that people are trying to move their money into hard assets because we have determined that the governments are bankrupt and they are going to devalue our currency and make it worth less. And so gold is a hard asset. It's hard to get more of. You have to dig it out of the ground. So let's store our wealth in something that's going to preserve it to the future. When things are uncertain, you want to create more certainty for yourself by storing your time and energy in something that's going to hold its value. And this is what we've kind of see is that people are trying to figure out what the hardest form of money is, the thing that cannot be created more of in order to protect themselves. And we wonder how something that, like Bitcoin has gone from worth nothing to being worth around 90,000 US dollars per coin over the course of its 15 years of existence. And the reason for that is that it's a combination of things. First of all, it's a brand new network. So, the more people that get involved in it, the more people that kind of understand and see it as money and money that will preserve its purchasing power are effectively hoarding it to be able to say, like, I think that this year is going to hold my purchasing power and my time and energy better than dollars. And so they're purchasing it. So that's kind of the first thing. And it's going to, like, you have something that, here's a good meme that I like. Bitcoin has no top because dollars have no bottom, right? You have something that has a fixed supply, has never been hacked in its 15 years of existence. The 21 million Bitcoin that are going to be available, there will never be more. And we have guarantees around that because it is a decentralized network. You can look at the code, and for you to be able to change it to 22 million Bitcoin, you would have to tell all the people that are running nodes on the Bitcoin network that it's in their interest to be able to change that, right? So, and why would they ever change it? Like the reason why Bitcoin has value is because it never changes, right? The supply never changes. That's the reason why people believe in it, right? So they would never. It would be considered in complete blasphemy to suggest even changing the supply of it, because that's what gave it value in the first place. I am disincentivized as a Bitcoin owner myself to decrease the value of my own money and issue more onto the market. So you have something like Bitcoin, and it's an asset which is a fixed 21 million supply. And then on the other hand, you have dollars, which there is no limit for how many can be created, right? And we're seeing that happen in real time. Of course, the thing that is going to be fixed and scarce is going to increase in value. That's the only way to be able to reconcile the two differences. And of course, real estate is going to increase in value. Of course, gold is going to increase in value. So that's kind of what we're seeing. The only way out of this for governments is to be able to print the money. And what that creates when people realize that is the incentive to try to store your money in something that actually does have value.
Gotcha. So, two other things I wanted to get into real quick. What about like mining for crypto? Is like what process is that? Does all crypto require mining? Because isn't that essentially what's the process? And isn't that essentially like drain on electricity to mine so much crypto? I've heard that anyway. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. So mining and how Bitcoin and some other cryptocurrencies interface with energy markets is one of the most fascinating and deepest rabbit holes that you can kind of go across. But I'll try my best to be able to summarize it as well as possible. So Bitcoin is the way that Bitcoin, the reason why I cannot, so mining is effectively a global competition of how much energy can you put into the system, and whoever is expending the most energy with the latest technology of miners, so the most efficient miners, gets rewarded for securing the network. The reason why Bitcoin cannot be attacked per se is because to be able to spend a Bitcoin more than once, which is kind of violating this rule of digital scarcity, it's what they call a double spend. You would have to control enough of the Bitcoin miners, and as a derivative of that, enough of the energy production to be able to have more than 50% of the mining power on the network. And in that case, if you had 51% of the mining power on the network, you would be able to mine a block where I spend a Bitcoin with someone else, and that value is transferred, and then mine another block where I spend that Bitcoin again, and kind of be able to dictate the rules. So mining is a way to be able to secure the network to ensure that when blocks are added to the blockchain, that money is only spent once. And it's a system of incentives where in exchange for securing the network with vast amounts of energy and mining equipment and capital investments, you are rewarded with a small amount of Bitcoin every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, a new block is mined. When a block is mined, a number of transactions are included in that block. So if I sent Bitcoin to you right now on chain, then it might take up to 10 minutes for it to actually get to your wallet and for you to be able to spend it. And when that happened, a block was added onto the blockchain. And it's a free market. So Bitcoin only has so many transactions that it can do every single 10 minutes. And whoever pays the highest fees gets into that block. So think of the blockchain as like, let's say we are sending container ships from China to Canada for goods and services. And on that container ships, there's a bunch of containers, and those containers have goods and services in this. In this analogy, each container is a transaction on the Bitcoin network. And at the port, they're trying to decide one container ship or block leaves every 10 minutes. Who gets on the next ship that's leaving the port? Well, it's whoever pays the highest market price, right? So if you say, I'm going to pay $100 to be able to, get my container on the ship, and that's the highest market price, then the miners are going to be able to, they're going to mine that block because they're going to get rewarded with that $100, and then they're going to put you on the next ship that is going to go overseas. Mining does consume a ton of energy. Like the amount of energy that you would need to attack the Bitcoin network, meaning have more than 51% of the hash power, would be probably on the order of the entire energy generation for like the country of like Sweden or something like that.
Wow.
That's how much energy is actually currently being used on the Bitcoin network. The interesting thing about this is that energy also has a cost, right? So if you go to it would never make sense to mine Bitcoin in New York because there is so much demand for energy to from people who are in office buildings, from bars and restaurants, from any type of manufacturing that happens over there. That the energy cost is going to be so high. Bitcoin miners also have to pay for that energy, right? So they're going to gravitate towards the lowest cost of energy, and in many cases, this is stranded energy. In BC, we have overbuilt our hydroelectric energy to the point where a lot of the times we could generate more energy, but the dams are going to overflow. So they have these kind of spill offs where they're saying like, okay, let's just like release some of the water from the dam so that we don't actually turn that into, so it doesn't spin our turbines. We don't actually generate energy. So it's effectively stranded energy because it's like we could produce more energy, but we can't because the grid has to also be like the amount of energy that is created on a network on the grid, on the power grid, has to be the same as the amount that is consumed on the power grid. So we can't just create more energy for the sake of creating more energy. So we effectively have stranded energy here in BC. What that does is it drives down prices. Like BC does have some of the lowest energy prices, especially up in northern BC, where you're living in kind of these pockets where there isn't a lot of people, there isn't a lot of energy demand, but there's a lot of energy supply because we've overbuilt capacity over the last 50, 100 years. So what you find then is that Bitcoin miners and AI data centers are also very energy intensive, that they co-locate with stranded sources of energy. Because effectively, what a Bitcoin miner is saying, I'm going to purchase energy off of you for 2 cents a kilowatt, and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to mine Bitcoin with that, and then sell that Bitcoin on the network for 7 cents. So they're kind of they're almost like creating an arbitrage where it's like, if I can purchase cheap energy and then sell it on the network for a higher price, then that is going to be a profitable enterprise for me. You kind of see this in a lot of different places. So Iceland is another good example of a place that has a lot of geothermal energy. Like you kind of see, videos of all of these like thermal geysers that are happening on Iceland because I guess the lava underneath them is like much closer to the surface than it is in other parts of the world. So they have a lot of geothermal energy, and typically when a place has a lot of energy but not a lot of people, it's used for things that are extremely energy intensive, but then don't necessarily have a buyer of energy. So they have all this energy, they need to sell it to someone. And historically, like something like aluminum smelting is something that is extremely energy intensive because of the furnaces that they have to run to be able to smelt aluminum and turn aluminum ore into raw aluminum. So a lot of that would happen in Iceland because they have all of this stranded energy. Energy is very cheap. So it's actually cheaper to mine aluminum ore in one country, ship it over to Iceland, smelt it into aluminum rods, and then ship it back to the consumers of aluminum somewhere else. It's more economically efficient to do that. So historically, they've had a lot of aluminum smelting there and whatnot. But in this world where now we have a new buyer of first resort. So think of Bitcoin as a buyer of first resort. If you set up a solar panel in a field and it's not connected to the grid, and you can run a Bitcoin miner off of that, then you now have a way to be able to convert your energy into money directly. And this has a lot of interesting stories behind it where, for example, in Ethiopia, There is a jungle where they have conservation of the jungle and all of the, interesting animals and silverback gorillas or whatever they have there. Um, and these parks need to be funded because they have, like, effectively they have employees to be able to, secure the park. They have to arm their employees because there's a whole bunch of poachers coming and trying to hunt trophy game. And they want to be able to conserve the park so that the biodiversity can remain for many generations forward. But this is very expensive, and the government of Ethiopia doesn't have a ton of money to be able to fund this. So what they realized is that they actually have a lot of waterfalls, and they also have like a lot of abundant energy through hydroelectric there.
Mm.
So what they started doing is that they realized that, okay, we have all of this energy, but no one, or this potential energy, that if we installed power plants, we could, but we don't have a lot of consumers of it. But now that you actually have a buyer of first resort with something like Bitcoin or, AI data centers, you can put down some Bitcoin miners, you can build a power plant, and you can create electricity for where electricity did not exist before. And we're talking about Africa here. There is a lot of communities in Africa where, it could be a village where, the only time that you can charge your cell phone is during the day when the sun is shining and you have a solar panel there, right?
Okay.
And so Bitcoin mining has created this new incentive and this new buyer of energy, which incentivizes power build out in places where there isn't a lot of people to be able to consume that power, to be able to generate you money, which you can go and sell on the open market to be able to get goods and services, to be able to pay your employees and things like that, right? So Bitcoin, the point that I'm making is that Bitcoin kind of gravitates towards places where energy is cheap. It wouldn't make sense for me to mine Bitcoin here in my apartment in Vancouver because I live in a city. There's so much demand for this already. There's so much industry. There's already so many buyers of the energy. And so the price of energy is actually expensive in comparison to some place like Northern BC or Park in Ethiopia. It's what it's doing, what we're getting in exchange for that energy consumption is a global, decentralized, non-sovereign monetary network where I can store my purchasing power into the future. And, I'm not like, there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are kind of like, send the energy to the moon. Like, we don't care how much energy we're using or where it's coming from. Or if it's like burning fossil fuels and increasing carbonization to be able to do it. But
Right.
I'm a reformed liberal myself, but I do see the value in decarbonization, and I do see the threat of climate change. But I don't think that this has to necessarily be intrinsically tied to the concept that like energy usage equals bad. In fact, I think that human flourishing is actually closely correlated to the amount of energy that we use. Like, have you ever gone to the gym and like gone into like a rowing machine or something like that, and it tells you how many like watts you're generating? Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So if I'm going like full out, like, and I can only do this for like 5 minutes, I can generate like 250 watts myself, right?
Okay.
That's enough to like power like a light bulb, right? But when I'm like going through my day, like I'm consuming thousands, if not millions of watts when I'm cooking, all of the meat that, I have in my fridge, all of the energy that was consumed to be able to bring the groceries to the grocery store so that I could go and get it in the form of trucks that are consuming this. So developed economies require a ton of energy to be able to operate. And the more energy that we're able to produce and consume in a decarbonized and a clean way is actually good for society, and it's good for humans because we're able to do more stuff with it, right? When we look at problems like, oh shit, we're going to run out of water one day, right? Like we don't have enough fresh water for the future, right? Well, we actually do have a lot of water on the planet. In fact, the planet has more water than it has land, right? Like we have the oceans. But the problem with the oceans is that it's salty, right? And to be able to remove the salt from it, you have to distill the water. So you have to evaporate it in order to be able to convert it into steam so that it purifies it to get rid of the salt. And then we can just scoop that salt back into the ocean. So we actually have abundant fresh water, or the potential of abundant fresh water. But the problem with it, and the reason why, California is all worried about their lakes drying up and things like that, is that it consumes a shit ton of energy to be able to heat up water, to boil it, to be able to distill it again. But if energy is abundant, if energy isn't a problem in that situation, if we have, nuclear or even fusion to be able to, power these water distillation facilities, fresh water becomes a problem of the past, right? Like we can solve a lot of our problems in the world by just making them more energy intensive. And the civilizations and the nations which are considered richer and wealthier and have people where they're able to live comfortable lives, and be able to self-actualize, you'll typically find that there's a direct correlation between how much energy that nation produces and consumes. So I don't think that energy generation is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but then it has to be done in the right way, right? Now, I'll say one more thing about this before I go off of this energy rant. What is going to be the cheapest form of energy that we're able to produce? So it's typically going to be renewables. And the reason why renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels is because fossil fuels require an input. You actually have to put something into the power plant in order to create the energy, right? So things like solar, things like hydroelectric, things like nuclear, things like wind are always going to be cheaper energy than something that you actually have to put natural gas into it, put coal into it. Like that requires a lot of expense. So that energy is going to gravitate towards zero when coal or any type of fossil fuel energy has a floor as to how cheap it can get. If we go back to the dynamic about Bitcoin always gravitating towards the cheapest energy, then it's always going to gravitate towards renewables. And we see this in Texas. So Texas had a whole bunch of solar built out. They got lots of sun in Texas and big skies, right? There's a whole bunch of solar power that was built out in Texas. And the energy markets in Texas work kind of differently to how they do, at least in BC. I'm not quite sure about Ontario and Thunder Bay. But the price fluctuates throughout the day. So if you're consuming energy during peak times, so like before work, like after work when people come home and things like that, and everyone's cooking at the same time, energy is going to be more expensive during those times, right?
Yeah, we have that.
Okay, so this is exacerbated in a place like Texas where they've had massive solar built out because of green incentive programs for by the government, and they actually have times during the day when the solar farms are producing so much energy and no one's using it that the price of energy goes negative, so they're actually paying you to be able to use that energy, because that energy has to go somewhere, right? Either it has to be radiated, like it has to go through some sort of resistors to be converted into heat to just be burnt off into the atmosphere. It has to go somewhere. Again, a grid requires a balance of the amount of producers and the amount of consumers at any given time. It has to be balanced. Otherwise, we're going to see voltage spikes. You're going to get power overloads and your computer is going to get fried, right? So in a place like Texas, during these peak periods where they're actually paying people to be able to take the energy, who's going to come in there and sweep in and say, hey, I'll buy that energy. Hey, you can pay me to be able to take that energy because I can mine that and I can turn that into money, right? So what it's doing is it's actually making the build out of renewable energy more viable, because there is a first buyer of energy in the network, which we've never had this dynamic before, right? Before, when you need to use energy, you have to like what are we going to do? We're going to run an aluminum plant 24/7. And, an aluminum plant, it's going to take time to be able to start up the furnaces and shut down the furnaces. Like, they're not very elastic, right? A Bitcoin miner, can shut off in the matter of seconds and respond to the demand. So it's creating a lot more elasticity in the energy networks itself. They can spin up when they are consuming power, and when the price shoots up and goes high, there was this period, I think a couple of years ago in Texas, where basically they had like an ice storm or something, and like things were super cold, so a lot of people were using heating at home, and the energy prices soared. And Bitcoin miners are responsive to that, where they're like, oh, at some point, maybe it's at 20 cents per kilowatt, mining Bitcoin is no longer profitable for us because we're paying more for the energy than we're getting to be able Bitcoin to do it, to be able to spend out on, or to be able to sell on the open market. So this is not a profitable enterprise. So Bitcoin miners respond by curtailing their energy use and then turning off so that more energy can flow towards the grid. So this dynamic is actually stabilizing energy grids, especially when we have technologies which are not providing stable power, right? The sun is only shining for like 8 to 10 hours a day. So what you're seeing in the energy grids is that production is going up during the daytime, and then it's dropping during the evening. And what's kind of picking up the rest of the pieces is like what they call base load in energy. So that's like a nuclear plant, a coal plant, something that can run 24/7, right? And so Bitcoin's helping smooth out the consumption curve of energy so that we can be able to build out more energy for grids, which aren't necessarily reliable and consistent baseload for the networks. So I don't know how we got here, but I know you asked a question about what is mining and how do Bitcoin miners work.
Yeah, man.
With the energy consumption and whatnot. But it's fascinating when you actually look at the dynamics that are created by this new buyer of first resort and think about what are the implications on the energy markets? Is this going to make energies more abundant for people? Is this going to cause, and when energy becomes abundant, then we become also more abundant ourselves because we have free water, because we have all of these other things. So, yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting, man. Couple quick comments if you want to make some responses to a couple of questions and comments from the audience here. So this person, the real deal, does Kurtis think BTC will be quantum resistant in the future? I guess BTC is Bitcoin, right? I know they are working on that now. Any thoughts on it?
It's a great question, and it's one of the biggest debates in the Bitcoin community.
And what does that mean? Sorry, because I don't understand. Quantum resistant. Okay.
Yeah. So Bitcoin is uses a number of different cryptographic algorithms in order to be able to secure its network. So it uses it for mining, and some of these cryptographic functions might be broken by quantum computers in the future. So a couple of these, so we use one hashing algorithm called SHA-256 in order for to be able to mine Bitcoin, and we use elliptical curve cryptography in order to generate public and private key pairs, which basically means like a private key is something that I use on the Bitcoin network to be able to spend money, to be able to send money from someone else. A public key is used to be able to receive money. And how you generate a public key is you start with a private key, you run it through a cryptographic algorithm, and then that generates you a public key. And this here is one of the algorithms that is potentially going to be broken by quantum computing. So you can use this algorithm to derive a public key from a private key, but you can't go from a public key to a private key. Even though I know the address of how you receive Bitcoin, I don't need to be able to know the address of how you're able to spend Bitcoin, if that makes sense, right? You want the ability to be able to send Bitcoin from an address to be secure, but you want the address of being able to receive Bitcoin to be public, because you need to be able to receive it from other people. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so quantum computing is going to change a lot of things. And one of the things it's going to change is that some algorithms which rely on the principles of mathematics are there's questions on whether or not they're going to be quantum resistant and if they will be broken. So let's say I had a quantum computer. Maybe there's a new world where I can actually derive your private key by knowing what your public key is. And that would be bad, because even for you to say, hey, Curtis, send me some Bitcoin for, exchange of this service, and you have to give me your public key. If I had a quantum computer, that means I could derive your private key and spend your money. So that would be a really bad thing. That would break the security model of Bitcoin. Now, will Bitcoin be upgraded to be quantum resistant? It's a huge debate as to how this should be done. There's a couple of risks as to, there's a couple of risks to Bitcoin that need to be addressed. So the first one is this risk of being able to derive a private key from a public key. And that comes from elliptical curve cryptography, which the governments have put out a notice, the National Institute of Standards, the NIS, has put out a notice to banks and important anyone that uses cryptography that, hey, we should probably be migrating off of these cryptographic standards within the next 5 years. That's kind of their time horizon. Otherwise, your encryption on your bank is going to be broken. Encryption on radio frequencies that help direct airplanes is going to be broken. So everyone's kind of looking at it like, okay, how do we actually, what algorithms can we upgrade to which are going to be resistant to being able to crack it in a quantum computer world? And it's one of the things that the Bitcoin system can be upgraded to be able to do. So when I think I said earlier that Bitcoin can't be changed. So there's certain things about it that can't be changed, such as the supply limit, because there's an incentive to never change that. There are other things on Bitcoin of how Bitcoin works. Like, for example, what cryptographic algorithm do we use to be able to derive private public key pairs that can be upgraded over time? And there's research that's being done now to get ahead of that ball, that it's like, okay, if it does seem like we are at a risk of a quantum computer being released next year, or maybe we're seeing Bitcoin being moved around on the network that looks like it's being done by a quantum computer, then we can do this upgrade to be able to move towards a quantum resistant algorithm, so that the network retains its integrity. So I mean, I'm pretty bullish on human ingenuity when it comes to these types of challenges that we're going to face. To answer your question, the real deal, yes, there are people that are working on upgrading the Bitcoin network today, and there's proposals out there as to what algorithms we should use to be able to upgrade Bitcoin to make it quantum resistant. And then there's some other kind of more philosophical debates where it's like, okay, if a coin hasn't been spent in, and been hasn't, how do I say this? If there are coins that haven't moved on the network for a very long time, for example, Satoshi's coin. Satoshi created this network. He mined about 1 million coins, and in 15 years, he hasn't spent a single one. The problem is that those coins are in addresses which because they were created and sent to addresses in a time that we didn't have quantum resistant addresses, it is possible that, let's say, everyone who currently uses Bitcoin on the network upgrades to these new addresses which are quantum resistant, but then Satoshi's coins, which are 1 million coins on the network, are still vulnerable to that attack of being stolen by a quantum computer. So what should we do with that? Should we lock the coins because they haven't been spent in 15 years? Should we, and to prevent them from being stolen, should we allow them to be stolen and then forever, whoever steals them to be able to sell them out onto the open network or onto the open market? These are kind of philosophical debates which have to do with property rights. Like, if you haven't touched your coins in a long time, should we violate your property rights by making your coins unspendable in order to preserve the integrity of the network? And I think that most Bitcoiners fall onto the side, I don't know how much we've talked about property rights in this chat, but and how much it is important for economies to be able to be created. But we really value in Bitcoin. We really value property rights. We say, I hold Bitcoin and this money is mine, and no one should be able to take that or print more of it. Right? It's kind of part of the fundamental principles.
Okay.
So what the proposals are right now is maybe we can create a system where it's like, yes, you can steal those coins and then bring them out onto the open market with a quantum computer, but you can only do so as a trickle. So you can only steal a little bit at a time, like maybe like 50 Bitcoin a day or 50, a little Bitcoin here, a little Bitcoin there. So we're not necessarily violating the property rights of the owners of that Bitcoin by censoring them and saying you can no longer spend these, but we're saying we're trying to think about, okay, can we at least control the damage and make the damage happen slowly over time, and eventually they will all be stolen by someone with a quantum computer, but it's going to take 5 years.
Okay, interesting. The fact that there's only so many Bitcoin, also I wanted to add, it's interesting because there's so many. Well, there's quite a few. I mean, I've seen a handful even on Netflix alone about scandals or crimes about missing Bitcoin. So does that make it more valuable? Like, what happens with those lost Bitcoin? They're just gone forever, right? If you can't access them, or if the person's dead, or yada yada yada.
Yeah, I mean, there's this guy in the UK who, he mined a bunch of Bitcoin when he was, like 15 years ago, and then he didn't think it would be worth anything, and so one day he threw his computer in the garbage because computers, they do have a shelf life or usable life, and eventually they become too slow. Had Bitcoins on the hard drive, threw it in the garbage, went to the garbage dump, and his Bitcoin that is on that hard drive is now worth like upwards of 100 million pounds today.
Oh, he found it?
No, he didn't. He actually, so he was, it's been basically like a saga of him trying to get his Bitcoin back. So he was trying to pay the garbage dump company to excavate their landfill to be able to locate his hard drive so that he could get his Bitcoin back. When they said no, they're like, no, like, we're not going to do that for you. Even doesn't matter how much money you pay. Then he tried to buy the garbage facility. So he tried to buy the landfill.
Buy the place, yeah.
So he tried to buy the landfill. And so he was trying to raise money from venture capitalists and being like, if you give me $20 million, then I can buy the landfill and excavate it myself. And then I will share, some of that $100 million of Bitcoin with you. But I think that also failed. And he's been like, the poor bloke has been at this for like, I think 7 years now, trying to like figure out how to get his money back. But ultimately, because there is less of it now on the network, like those coins are most likely never going to be found. Then, he will never be able to get his Bitcoin back. So there is a lot of Bitcoin on the network, like this gentleman's, 100 million pounds of Bitcoin that is buried at the bottom of a garbage dump. Like Satoshi's coins, those million coins that I mentioned earlier, who is, he could be dead, but no one knows who he is. Right. But he's very likely, what a move to be able to create this protocol, put it onto the internet, let it into the wild, let it flourish and go on for 15 years and never take and consume or spend any of the money or the rewards that you got.
Crazy, man.
It is, yeah. He has 5% of the Bitcoin supply, a million coins. If there's like 20-ish million of them today.
With so much already missing and gone, like 5% is a big chunk to lose. Like if you want,
it's a lot.
Maybe 5% or more is already gone or lost.
Totally, right. It's a huge, significant portion of the coins on the network.
I totally see what you're saying. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. If I were to try to send Bitcoin to you, Jordan, and I sent it to the wrong address and there is no private key to be able to spend that Bitcoin's gone forever. Like there is no customer support to call.
Wow.
Think of it as like a donation to the rest of the holders on the network, that supply will never be sold onto the network ever again. And that's kind of, what we see is that like, going back to I think you asked about scams and scandals because there has been a lot of controversy throughout the years about Bitcoin. There was there was an exchange in Vancouver, BC called Quadriga, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, that's right. It was in Vancouver. Oh my God.
yes,
I totally forgot about that.
and yeah, it was one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in Canada. I think from in like the mid 2010s. I think it was like until 2017 or something like that. And a lot of people purchased Bitcoin on this exchange, but then they never sent it to their own wallet. So they never actually took custody of it. It's like purchasing money in a bank, but then just like leaving the money in the bank account versus like taking the cash out and like stuffing it under your mattress. That would be like the closest comparison. And so a lot of people left their money on the exchange. And one day, the CEO of the company goes on a trip to India, and he
That's who I
dies
was talking
out there.
about. That's the one I was talking about, Gerald Cotton, right?
Yes, that's right. And he
Yes,
dies. He dies in
that one is
India.
wild. That one is
It's
sorry, keep going. Keep going.
it's completely wild because when he died, apparently, allegedly, he was the only one in the company that had access to be able to return the user funds because he was in control of the private keys. So he only had the access to be able to send them. There's a lot of questions about the story. I don't know how. I think he had like Crohn's disease, which is like an inflammatory bowel thing,
Yeah, man. It's
and
sketchy.
and then
Very
that's what
sketchy.
killed him out in India. And like, who knows if that's the truth, or maybe the case is that he just ran away with everyone's funds, faked his death, and has been living a fabulous lifestyle with billions of dollars somewhere, on a beach. And no one actually knows what the true story is. But the lesson here within this is Bitcoin you have the ability with Bitcoin to take custody of the asset. It's almost like it's the difference between owning gold and having it in like an ETF on the stock market or storing it in a bank, or taking the gold bars out and storing them with yourself on your person at home. When you're storing your gold with someone else, whether that's a bank, whether that's a ETF, in Canada we use the Royal Canadian Mint to be able to store that gold. You are trusting that custodian is going to operate in good faith, and that the day that you come and ask for your gold, that they're going to actually redeem that and give that to you, rather than when you store it and take custody of it yourself. Then you are responsible for securing it and making sure that it's locked up in a safe and no one steals it. With Bitcoin is because you're able to send it over the internet. You are able to take custody of that Bitcoin yourself. And a lot of people with Quadriga didn't understand that. So by leaving their Bitcoin on the exchange with Quadriga, they were effectively trusting that the company, Quadriga, was going to remain secure and not lose their funds because of just incompetence, or the CEO kind of being the only person that is able to send it off and he dies, or to something more malicious, like someone actually stealing the funds, whether that's a hacker that's hacking Quadriga, or the CEO disappearing in India and stealing the funds and taking off with them. You have the option to be able to take custody of it yourself. And it's something that's very important ethos in Bitcoin, because there have been countless number of exchanges such as Quadriga, such as FTX, such as BlockFi, such as Celsius. The list goes on and on of all of these companies who either said that they had your Bitcoin and they didn't, or they were rehypothecating your Bitcoin and lending it out to other companies to trade with. And when those companies went bankrupt and lost all of your Bitcoin, then you lost your Bitcoin as well. But you had the option, or you have the option with Bitcoin, to be able to take custody of it yourself. And I always recommend that people, when they get into Bitcoin, is that they learn about self-custody and what it actually takes to be able to secure that money yourself. Because this is a story that has happened many times before, and it's going to keep happening, where exchanges, it's kind of like a bank run. It's kind of like the old version of a bank run where we had fractional reserve banks, and one day, like, there was some sort of market instability and people were like, well, I'm going to go take my money out of the bank. And the bank's like, oops, we don't actually have it because we've been lending it out to other people, right? And it's the same thing with these Bitcoin exchanges, that if you're leaving your money with these banks, then there is the possibility that, when you go to try to take it out, they might not have it all. So it is a bit of a wild west because this is such a new technology, because it's only been around for 15 years. It takes governments a long time to be able to catch up in terms of regulations and understand, how these custodians should be treating your Bitcoin, or how they should be storing it, to make sure that there aren't single points of failure in place that, like what happened with Quadriga. It's a lot of responsibility, because just like if you were to take gold and bring it home and stuff it under your mattress, now you are responsible for that security. You are responsible for, making sure that no one breaks into your house and steals it, making sure that, like, a family member doesn't steal it, making sure that you don't lose it. It's a lot of responsibility to be your own bank, but it also comes with a lot of benefits, because no one can tell you what you can do with that money. No one can stop you from fleeing the country with that money if you had to. Like, there's lots of stories of when the Ukraine-Russia war broke out, of a lot of people, especially younger males, were trying to leave the country because they knew that they would be conscripted into a war that they didn't want to fight,
Right.
or they didn't believe in. And so a lot of people were like, well, I'm going to take my savings and I'm going to, go seek asylum in another country because I don't want anything to do with this. And so the ATMs and the banks were basically drained of, whatever they use for money in Ukraine almost immediately, because you had so many people fleeing the country. And if you left the country with gold bars or, cash in your pocket, they don't want to see that either, because you're effectively taking wealth out of the country as well. There's a lot of people that were when faced with that circumstance, they chose to be able to, instead of leaving, the country with suitcases full of dollars or gold, that they decided, it's like, well, you know what, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin with this instead. And with Bitcoin, because I'm in possession of it and no one can even detect that I'm in possession of that, I can take my savings and wealth to another country to be able to start a new life, to be able to raise my family in another country. And this is a dynamic between individuals and governments that we have never really seen before, because there are such things as capital controls, right? Like, I got stopped at the airport when I was going to Japan last year. And it was the first time that I've actually been stopped by a customs officer on the way out of Canada. Usually you chat with him on the way into Canada.
Yeah.
But as I was leaving past the security line, guy pulled me aside and he's like, hey, sir, so are you bringing money out of the country right now? I'm like, yeah, well, I got some Japanese yen and things like that on me. He's like, okay, how much? And I told him, so it was under, $10,000 Canadian. So, it was within the legal limits. And he's like, do you have any gold? Do you have any jewelry on you? Are you bringing anything else to take wealth out of the country? Is kind of the subtitle to what he was asking.
Right.
And I was like, nope, like, that's all I have. Like, you can give me a cavity search. You will find no gold bars stuffed inside of my butt. And he's like, all right. And the ironic part about it is I was looking at him and I was wearing a hoodie with a Bitcoin logo on it that I got in this Bitcoin community in Africa. And I wanted to tell him, I'm like, you realize that, like, I could have $1 billion of value with me and I can move that around anywhere in the world. And there's no way that you would be able to prove that I have that on me, or you would be able to stop me, right? Because you can hold Bitcoin in your brain if you have the password or the passphrase. Right? Yeah. So if you have so Bitcoin, an address, a public-private key pair, can be derived from a list of 12 words. So if you memorize 12 words, it's what they call a brain wallet. You could have that 12 words and you could put it into a wallet on your computer, or I could go to Japan and then put it into a wallet over there and be able to spend that Bitcoin in Japan. Keeping value money inside your brain and being able to move across borders and evade capital controls is a power dynamic shift that we have never seen in the history of civilization, because you usually have to cross borders with money to be able to flee Ukraine, because I don't want to be conscripted into the army there. And I think that this is going to create an interesting dynamic because of this power shift. I think that governments are going to have to start treating their citizens like customers instead of cattle. Because if you don't like how you're being taxed, if you don't like the services that are being provided by your government, whether that's infrastructure or the highways, or if you don't want your money, if you store your value in Canadian dollars, to be printed into bombs that are sent to Israel and Ukraine to be able to fight these wars that we have nothing to do with, then you have a choice to be able to opt out, because you can leave the country with your wealth and move to a place that further aligns with your personal set of values and the things that you want. So what you're going to see is that, like in Norway recently, I think within the last 2 years, they introduced a new tax on unrealized capital gains, meaning that if you own some Facebook stock or something like that, or if you start a private business that is now worth more than it was when you had originally bought it, that capital gain, even though it's just a paper gain, and you haven't actually realized the value and sold that investment, you have to pay taxes on that now. You have to pay an unrealized capital gains tax. And what we saw was that a whole bunch of people, so they were doing this in order to be able to increase their tax receipts, right? They wanted to be able to spend more money and have a balanced budget, and so they needed to increase their tax receipts, so they created this new law. And what we saw was a lot of the high net worth individuals who did have unrealized capital gains, they're like, no, fuck it, I'm out. I'm just going to move to another country and bring my wealth with me and be able to, maybe they're an entrepreneur, maybe they create jobs there, maybe they're productive members of society that Norway no longer has because they didn't treat their citizens like customers. And what ended up happening is that the original goal here was to increase their tax receipts and improve, increase the amount of money that they're collecting from their citizens. And it actually dropped because a lot of their highest taxpayers ended up leaving anyways, right?
Right.
And I think that Bitcoin is going to create this dynamic because it creates the ability to be able to bring your hard-earned time and value with you to be able to start a new life in a different country. If you do have Bitcoin, which you cannot do without going through all of the regulatory frameworks. Like, you can't just take gold out of the country without reporting it. You can't just leave the country and abandon a tax residency without selling all of your financial assets. But with Bitcoin, it's different.
One final comment from the audience here. Frank Sidebottom says, I don't know if you know what this is all about. BlackRock has been buying mining firms. BlackRock may be pushing the price below the cost of mining. This will put miners at a loss, with many will shut down. And then she says, but BlackRock subsidizes miners will rock on, and BlackRock may acquire over 50% of the hashing power and fork their own Bitcoin. Bitcoin by BlackRock may become the only legit Bitcoin.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Heard of that? Any comments on that?
I'm not actually aware of BlackRock purchasing Bitcoin miners. I'm assuming what Frank means by that is that BlackRock in many ways, through their ETF products, are usually the largest owners of every company. Anything that's a publicly traded company you'll always see, if you go and look at who owns that company, BlackRock as being one of the number one shareholders. And that's done because people invest in BlackRock ETFs, and then with those ETFs, BlackRock goes and purchases shares of Facebook, shares of Google, shares of Bitcoin miners and whatnot. So even though BlackRock is usually on the top of the cap table as far as ownership goes, who owns BlackRock? Well, it's people that invest in BlackRock ETFs, right? It's people like you and me. So the chain of ownership actually comes back to individuals and other institutions, and those shares, yes, they might be on the top of the cap table on a mining company, but they're actually owned by private individuals and institutions. So I don't necessarily know kind of what the second and third order consequences are of, okay, so BlackRock is the number one shareholder of a miner, and then they have a governance power to be able to tell that miner what to be able to do. So could they, in theory, infiltrate through governance some of the largest miners in the US, like Marathon, like Compass Mining, like, Riot Blockchain, and tell them to attack the network by doing like a 51% attack? Well, I think to answer that question, you have to kind of look at the incentives. Miners are cash flow producing companies because they secure a network like Bitcoin and are rewarded for their services. So I guess in theory, if BlackRock told all of the companies that they owned, all the mining companies, to attack Bitcoin, what that would do is it would destroy the value of Bitcoin, because they'll be like, oh my gosh, there's an attack going on. So there would probably be a big sell-off that people would try to unload their Bitcoin because they're like, we can't trust or secure this network anymore. But then BlackRock would be doing it. They would be destroying their own value because they own the miners. A whole bunch of their customers have entrusted them to secure their Bitcoin. They launched a Bitcoin ETF, the first in the US, last year, and it has been the most successful ETF launch in history, with the amount as far as like dollar inflows have gone. So they would be destroying their own customers' wealth and savings through ownership of Bitcoin miners, and everyone who bought a BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, their savings would be worth less. And then when that came out publicly, like for example, if there was whistleblowers inside the mining companies saying, oh, BlackRock was actually the ones that told us to attack the network, and because they are, they play a big role in our governance because they own the most amount of our shares, then BlackRock's reputation as a company would probably be destroyed at that point, because people have entrusted them with their savings and they went and destroyed their own customers' savings. So yeah, I guess it would be maybe possible to influence the miners and what the miners did, and if they were and turn them into bad actors, because they do hold like a, some, like being the biggest shareholder on your cap table does carry some weight. Whether or not they could convince the miners to be able to destroy their own businesses by attacking the Bitcoin network, and risk their reputation being destroyed to their customers, because they're basically destroying their own customers' wealth in products that they had marketed and provided. I'm skeptical if they have the incentives to do that, and there would have to be enough collusion and incentives within the mining companies themselves to work with BlackRock to be able to create that type of attack. So yeah, I'm skeptical if that could happen, because it's kind of, it's working in not in alignment with the mining companies and BlackRock and their investors, right? They would all have to be doing that. So yeah, it's what's the famous Charlie Munger quote, which is like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And I don't think the incentives are there for them to do an attack like that.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, thank you on that. Before we wrap it up, I know you wanted to kind of demonstrate the sending of Bitcoin and whatnot, right? Are you still up to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. First
I've
question
never
to
I've
you,
never
Jordan.
like I'm kind of what's that?
Have you ever used Bitcoin before? Have you ever
No.
held
So
Bitcoin?
I'm a little
Okay.
nervous, but like if you're down to do it, like fuck it, let's give it a try.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So
Yeah,
I
I think
downloaded the wallet of Satoshi.
yes.
Is that like a very common, a very popular wallet?
It's kind of the easiest wallet to get onboarded onto Bitcoin and be able to just receive a transaction without, you know, setting up a more secure device. Wallet of Satoshi, we talked a little bit about custodying your own Bitcoin versus relying on someone else to custody it. This is what they call a custodial wallet. And it comes with the trade-offs that, if Wallet of Satoshi, disappears one day, or if, the governments tell Wallet of Satoshi's like, your coins are now our coins, we're confiscating it, they are subject to those risks. However, it comes with the benefit of like, hey, I'm going to send you $10 Canadian here. And, that's not going to be life-changing money for you or me. I would never keep a large amount of money on it on Wallet of Satoshi, similar to how I wouldn't carry $50,000 in my pocket walking down the streets in Vancouver. So different wallets for different purposes, but Wallet of Satoshi is very common as a very easy and very fast to be able to set up Bitcoin wallet so that we can demonstrate this. But I wouldn't use it in the long term if you decide to sink some of your savings into there. So
you wouldn't use this long term if you were going to do like high value buying, selling, trading.
that's correct. Yeah, because it is
Okay.
a custodial wallet, then
And
it
again,
poses.
sorry, keep going. But what does custodial wallet mean?
Custodial means that someone else is holding your Bitcoin for you instead
Okay.
of so think of Wallet of Satoshi like it's not a bank, but like think of it like a bank where you are depositing your money into that bank and you're able to send money from that bank to other people, but you're not actually in physical possession of the money in there. So it's kind of like Quadriga, right? I purchased
Right.
Bitcoin on Quadriga, but I wasn't actually in possession of the Bitcoin. And that's a custodial wallet in this case.
There was, I think, like over 76,000 clients. Sorry if I just misheard you. If you don't mind me asking, were you, and you don't have to answer, of course, were you a client of or a user of Quadriga?
I was. I was a user of Quadriga. Thankfully, I didn't have any Bitcoin on there when the exchange disappeared,
Wow. Okay.
because I was like kind of going back to like me being really interested in technology. I don't just want to like buy it and being like, all right, that's it for me. Like I want to play
Sure.
around with it. I want to send it to different wallets. I want to figure out how this thing works. But I did have some friends that did have a material amount of Bitcoin and other crypto assets on Quadriga.
Okay.
And they've never gotten access back to that. They kind of just disappeared, and that was the end of that.
Oh, that's awful. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Can you hold you can hold Bitcoin and you could hold different cryptos in one wallet, correct?
You can.
Or
So, me being a proclaimed Bitcoiner, I don't usually ever recommend holding other types of cryptocurrencies, but
okay, so
you can,
you're into Bitcoin and that's primarily it
that's it
for
for me.
crypto. Okay.
Yeah. I used to be into crypto. So my journey was that how I first got into this was, I was mining Ethereum with a couple of coworkers, and I got into all the different cryptocurrencies and thought like, wow, like look at this new technology and all of this, these different, applications that we could create. We could decentralize Uber, we could decentralize Airbnb, we could decentralize Ticketmaster, and all of these, rent seekers that we have that are just kind of extracting value from these little transactions that we have between individuals in the economy. And I was a big believer. I was like, wow, this is going to change the world. And over time, and I actually wasn't into Bitcoin even at that time. I was just into crypto. I was just into all these different chains and projects that were spinning up. And there was this small community online when I was on back when it was Twitter that were kind of saying like, hey guys, all of this crypto bullshit is just noise. These are all just shit coins. Nothing else matters. Like Bitcoin is the signal. Nothing else matters. And I was like, how could you be so close-minded? How could you not think that there's all of these other applications that you could create using this technology, that you can't build a better Bitcoin, right? It's Bitcoin, but it's better because it's faster or it scales better or whatever it is because you can send monkey pictures to one another. That was my initial response, but I was like, okay, this is my reaction. I'm going to try and keep an open mind. I'm going to try and hear these people out and understand what they have to say about it. And I was primarily a speculator at that point. I was just buying these things because I thought that I would be able to sell them to someone else at a higher price in the future. And eventually, as I continued to learn about Bitcoin, and it took me on this journey on the history of money and the history of the Federal Reserve and how financial markets works and the computer science behind it. And it's so multidisciplinary, and it got me thinking. It kind of rewired my brain and how I think about the world, because I understood these concepts on a level that had never been, that I've never talked, that I never understood before, that I never, my mental model of the world was that we have these governments and we vote for what we want the government to do, and we give our money to them to spend it on the things that we want. And yeah, there's this thing called money printing, and maybe they're spending on things that we're not actually voting for, but that's just the way it is. And this can't be changed. There is no alternative to the system. My money is doomed to be continually losing its value, losing its purchasing power over time. And that's just the way it is. And these folks that said that Bitcoin was the signal, and like I continued to learn about it. And then one day I read a couple of books. I read The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. I read The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. I read When Money Dies, which is a book about Weimar Germany. And I just kept going down this, peeling back the layers of the onion. And then I realized that what all of these folks have been saying online, all of the things that they were talking about inflation, about money printing, about government overreach, COVID hit, and then all of this stuff started coming true. And I was like, holy shit, like what else do these guys write about? Like they're basically, in many of these books, like they were looking less like books and more like prophecies. And that kind of made me kind of pause and being like, oh shit, maybe these folks that were saying that Bitcoin is a signal, they were right all along. And this is a way for me to be able to opt out of inflation. This is a way for me to be able to opt out of censorship money or permissioned money, and potentially store my savings in something that could give me more financial and economic and physical, of like where I want to be in the world, freedom than has before. And frankly, this is like the only reason why I've been able to switch from the software world where I'm trading my time for money and start my own business, being in the coffee industry, opening cafes and growing that business, is because of Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin gave me the freedom to be able to be in control of my own financial future, and allowed me to generate and create the savings to be able to create what I wanted to create. It gave me a lot of agency in life. It changed the way I thought about money. It changed the way I thought about our relationship as citizens and our governments. And like I said, it's like really rewired my brain. And now with this new outlook, I see the world differently than I did before. And you'll hear this a lot when you speak to people that are like really into Bitcoin. You'll hear that theme a lot. Yeah, and it's also changed my relationship with money too, right? Like when you have money, which is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today in an inflationary economy that we currently live in, your incentive is to spend it as soon as you can, right? So we wonder why we've created like a generation of like nihilistic Gen Zers that are like dropping like $1,500 on a Taylor Swift concert instead of like saving up for a home. It's because hope has been lost to be able to achieve the goals that you and I want to achieve of having your own home, starting a family. All of these things are extremely expensive. And as we kind of continue to operate and store our money in something that is continually losing value over time and is being able to purchase less, these dreams that we have and the hope that we have kind of creeps away from us slowly over time. Now, conversely, you have a money which increases in purchasing power over time. So you know that if you go out and you work hard and you save your money in something that is going to provide you with the opportunity to be able to achieve your dreams in the future, that's a much more hopeful and optimistic version of the world and mentality for being like, no, I'm not going to be nihilistic. No, I reject the system that we found ourselves in. And no, I'm not going to store my hard-earned money in something that can be printed by, just at the stroke of a button, right? Like no man should be able to print what another man has to be able to trade their time and energy to be able to earn. That is too much power for even a group of 8 people at the Federal Reserve to be able to determine, right? We've gone so accustomed to handing over this power of money to our governments because we've had to, right? This has just been because of historical events that we've just kind of found ourselves in this situation where this is the status quo. But staying the same is not how the world works. In fact, we're in a constant state of change. And what you're seeing when Bitcoin is hitting, new all-time highs and, it hit like 125,000 US dollars this year, what that's telling you is that the market and all of the participants in this global economy are actually starting to believe that this thing can actually compete to be the global reserve currency, that we don't necessarily need a sovereign currency for every single nation. Instead, we can have one currency that makes trade a lot more efficient too, right? Like if everyone wants Bitcoin and we use it as money, well, I don't have to go out and get US dollars to be able to buy coffee packaging, in China or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So anyways, I don't know.
But do you mean, are you referring to Bitcoin in general or sorry, Bitcoin specifically or crypto in general? Because there's only so many Bitcoin, right? So how are you going to get that into a global system if it's so scarce?
Yeah. So going back to the divisibility thing,
is it? I was just going to say to follow up with that. Is it literally just like it'll mean breaking the increments down so much smaller to spread it out?
That's correct. You can purchase you can purchase a dollar. Like you don't have to purchase a whole Bitcoin, right?
Gotcha.
You can purchase $1 worth of Bitcoin if you wanted to. You could purchase a cent of Bitcoin if you wanted to. It is infinitely divisible, and that is so. If you have an asset which has a fixed supply, but you can purchase just a little bit of, basically you have think of it like. So, where do I want to go with this? Yeah, it's just infinitely divisible. There will only be so many Bitcoin, but you can actually divide that into like each Bitcoin has 100 million what we call sats in Bitcoin. So 100 million sats make up one Bitcoin, and there's 21 million Bitcoin available. So there is, I think, 21 quadrillion sats that are available on the Bitcoin network as a result. And if you think about it, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. That sounds like a lot.
Minus like at least 5%, minus who knows how much more about like the losses that we spoke about. So who knows? Let's say maybe another 5%.
Exactly, right? And if you think about, this concept of millionaires, I think there's something like 56 million millionaires in the world, around that range. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin. That means that when Bitcoin does become the global reserve currency, there is not enough Bitcoin for every millionaire in the world today to own just one. So the only thing that can respond to that is that the price has to go up. And so maybe there's honestly only enough Bitcoin for maybe every millionaire in the world today. If everyone today were to convert all of their money and savings into Bitcoin, those 56 millionaires would maybe own half a Bitcoin. And that's all that there would be to go around. It is inelastic to the amount of demand that there is. You can never create more Bitcoin. And so the only thing that allows Bitcoin to be able to be responsive to that is the price has to go up and it has to get more expensive.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right. So let's get back to this. So I got my wallet. I created a account using my email. What do I have to do next? So now I have a wallet.
Perfect. Yeah. So on that wallet, you want to hit receive.
And then just for people watching, this is the screen I see.
Mm-hmm.
It's got 0, and then you got send, receive. Mm-hmm. So receive. Okay.
And you see it probably gave you a QR code and a little address there as a receive address. If you could send that receive address to me.
Okay. And that's it's like a random email address, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there you are.
Awesome. Okay, so
and the QR code would be used, like if you were with me in person, you could scan the QR code with your phone and send it to me. Is that how that works?
Actually, that's a great idea. How about you show that QR code to me on the camera? That's just your receive address, so anyone who sees that doesn't have access to your Bitcoin. And I'm just going to, yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to try and scan that QR code through our video chat. Let's see if I can get it. There it is. Got it.
Cool.
So I'm going to send you 10 Canadian dollars, which in Bitcoin terms at the current exchange rate is 7,923 sats. So I'm using a different wallet. So this is called Phoenix Wallet, which is made by an entirely different company.
Okay, I've heard of Phoenix, I think. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so once I hit send, so I'm going to hit pay right now. Pay. And there we go. It says sent. Did you receive it on your phone? There you go. So what happened there? So I was able to send money over the internet from me to Jordan without any intermediary third parties. So usually, yeah, there you go. You got about $7. So that's $7 USD. You can change the conversion rate to Canadian if you wanted to.
Oh, right.
About $10. And why this is a crazy innovation is that, yeah, you can go into, there we go. Perfect.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, sir. That is cool. Wow.
Yeah. What's wild about this is like when you go to spend at a grocery store and you tap your credit card, there is 5 parties that are involved with that transaction. So you have the grocery store and their POS, and then you have the grocery store's bank who's communicating with over the Visa MasterCard network to whoever's to your bank account that is checking if you have the amount of money, and there's like a transaction that happens across there, right? So when I pay $10,
wow, I didn't think it was that complicated.
Yeah, there's like anywhere between like 3 and 5 intermediaries whenever you send money digitally in our current financial system, right? And each one of these intermediaries has their own cut of the cake, right? Like when you pay a grocery store $10, the grocery store at the end of the day after credit card processing fees is only getting about $7.75. So no, not that much. What am I talking about? It's 2.25%. So they're getting $9.97 on a $10 purchase. And so every time, and then they go and spend that money with, another vendor, and then that vendor gets, $9.95, and then that vendor goes and buys fruit from a farm, and then that farm gets $9.92. And every time Visa, MasterCard, the banks, the payment processors, the POS system are taking a little bit of cut. And so, I mean, is there any wonder why when we go around the biggest cities in the world and we say, who has the best real estate in the city? You look at all of the names on the towers that are kind of in the city center, and it's all banks, it's all financial institutions, it's all, Bank of Montreal, JP Morgan Chase. It's because every single time that we're spending money, these companies are just shaving a little bit off for themselves, right? What happened between Jordan and I just now when I sent you money, I was able to send you, $10 instantly, very close to free. And there was no other intermediaries in between us. Like, we didn't have a Visa network that was taking fees. We didn't have banks that were involved. I'm able to send value across the internet digitally with no other parties taking a cut like 2.25%. So it's a pretty big paradigm shift of being able to transact directly with people. And even at the cafe, because we're saving that 2.5% by you not spending on credit card. When you spend Bitcoin, like, Jordan, if you're ever in Vancouver and you want to come get a latte or something like that together, come to the cafe. You can spend some Bitcoin at the cafe.
Yeah, man. That's what I was going to say. Now, I was going to say the same thing. So now I can come in when I come to Vancouver, come into FUNK. And I can use the Bitcoin to pay. That's so interesting.
Totally. Yeah. And we actually give you a discount if you pay in Bitcoin because we don't have to pay credit card fees. So we give 5% discount for people that are paying in Bitcoin.
So you are really promoting it. That is cool, man. That is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Wow, man. This has been such a great conversation, man. I apologize for taking so much of your time. I told you I'd take like about an hour of your time, but I've gone well over that. But thank you so much for your time. Kurtis, where can people find you? People that want to find you in Vancouver or online, if that's possible. I know at least one person I saw in the comments was asking. I think it was Real Deal, where they can find you. So let them know.
Yeah. So you can. I'm not super active on social media myself. My businesses are, however. You can find us on Instagram at FUNK Coffee or at FUNK Coffee Bar. You can go to our website to purchase specialty coffee. We bring in the freshest beans from all over the world to be able to, bring out interesting flavors and change people's perception as to what coffee could be. We have this really cool coffee on. See, you got the website up here. That one, Pump Up the Volume. It's a Colombian coffee, which is a pretty rare and hard to cultivate varietal called a tabby. And it's done by this, pretty famous farmer in Colombia, Wilton Benitez. And this coffee, I had it on espresso just 2 days ago. And instantly when you smell it, you get hit with like raspberries, strawberries. And when you drink it, it tastes like raspberry sorbet. So, we're trying to push the envelope kind of like wine. Like, people think coffee is like supposed to be like bitter and like you need to add like a whole bunch of sugar and cream to like make it taste good.
I take mine black, man. I'm against
take it black.
I'm against all the sugar and the cream personally, not just because it's like super unhealthy, but it's like, well, why are you drinking I mean, I guess it's the caffeine, but I mean, there's other ways to get caffeine these days, right?
Totally. Yeah. And you can drink it for the flavor. And coffee has, when it's like, coffee's a cherry at the end of the day. It's like a fruit. If you actually eat a coffee bean off the tree,
it's right.
That's very sweet, right? But to make things taste consistent and to add coffee taste consistent, companies like Starbucks and Tim Hortons have kind of brainwashed us into thinking that what we taste in their stores is what coffee is supposed to taste like. But naturally, it's not. And we roast light and bright to be able to bring out those natural flavors so that you can taste something like a strawberry sorbet shake in your coffee without adding sugar, cream, flavoring, anything like that. It is just naturally what's in the coffee.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll send you some.
Oh man, that you're so generous already by sending me the Bitcoin, man. I appreciate that. But I mean, that sounds amazing. That sounds amazing, actually, because I do enjoy coffee as more of a treat. I try not to have it every morning, but yeah, it's a nice thing to it's a nice ritual in the morning, right?
It's definitely a ritual.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, man, thank you again so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. We'll definitely have to get together again and talk. I've already got a little bit of a list going of topics that I'd like to talk to you about again. So thank you again so much. I encourage people to check you out. Definitely check out your coffee shop and your website to check out your coffee. I'll definitely be doing that as well. And yeah, thanks to everyone in the chat and all the listeners. Shout out to Stephanie. And yeah, everyone, make sure to subscribe to the Divulgence podcast. You can check me out on Twitter at Divulgence Pod. And I've been getting some emails from people about coming on the show, which is great. So if you ever do, if you have a guest or someone you want to pitch, you can reach out to me at divulgencepod@gmail.com. Yeah, so that's it, everyone. Everyone take care, and everyone in the States have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And yeah, thanks again, Curtis. This was great.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, everyone.